would like to come out of executive session. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Come out of executive session. All right. On to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. And our presentations, our auditors.
This is our lovely Karen Oliveri.
I am here to talk about their audits. I was hoping to, we've done 20, 21, and 22. 20 is finalized, and that's Ross for 21 and 22.
This is just so people can hear you.
Oh, great. So basically, I just kind of wanted to give you the highlights of the 22 audit. 20 and 21 are already in the past, and 22 is the more current, and then talk about an estimated fund balance that we projected for FY23. That's what we do.
Yep.
So in 2022, your general fund balance was $3,206,617. In the transfer station, your fund balance was $90,705. Capital projects, $1,556,221. And in your special revenue funds, $666,079. And I'll get more into the fund balance in just a minute. The water was, well, it's net position, not really fund balance, so it includes, but they're in that position. Their change in that position was $90,000 in 2022.
And that was to the positive.
Yeah.
And that was based on a lot on the rate
Your rate
increases we did.
increase. Definitely. So we had some deficit fund balance as well. The deficit fund balances have been fund balances that have carried forward for several years. And it's the DEP wastewater, which had a deficit of $7,685, and then your emergency management, which are your special revenues for $4,081. So I guess at some point we probably ought to look at
Those predate
cleaning
Peg and
those
I.
up. Yeah, so basically, my assumption is that the expenses stayed with the fund, but the revenue probably got posted in your general fund many years ago, so it's still there. So take a look at that, maybe clean those up and get rid of those.
That makes sense.
And as far as we had some overspent appropriations. The select board, office of the select board in Article 4, there was over expenditure of $16,784 in the administrative budget. Article 5, it was $1,738. Assessment, Article 6 was $15,790. Emergency medical, Article 10 was $118,201, which I understand and have a copy of your annual town meeting referendum for 23 that was done in June of 22 is going to cover. There was 2 articles to cover the overage expenses, and then a revenue article, which we will take that and I think we'll just amend the report so that doesn't show it. We didn't have that because usually your June meetings for FY. So now that I have that, we'll make that correction. We'll get that out of there. They won't have it. Shellfish management, which is your Article 13, was $5,506, and roads and bridges. Article 18 was $27,509. Parks and cemeteries, Article 19 was $53, and then the Friendship Street School Program, which was Article 23, was $138 for a total of 185,719. And then you also have the article, to approve all overdrafts and fund balance, so. We'll-
So just remember that that includes EMS. That was also professional fees in 2022 that went over. Just to give you like and I know we go over this every year during our budget committee meetings, but I just wanted you to understand and recall, because we're back into 22 now.
We are in 22, I know this was.
So
A couple of years ago, and so it does.
just wanted to refresh everybody's memory.
It does get blurred. So we can talk a little bit about the budget itself and revenues and expenses, other than the budgeted. We can talk about the revenues. So in your revenue, they were of note. Your municipal sharing your budget was 622,500, but your revenue sharing came in at 972.78, so you were on the positive side of that by $347,778. So increases like that help your fund balance. Your property taxes were the budget was $8,667,900, but the actual was $8,896,183. So that was a positive of $228,283. Your excise tax, there was a budget of $850, and you actually took in $1,080,000. So there was a positive side of that as well of $233.29. The only negative that I really see in your revenues was Homestead and Betty for $111,219, but I think we've cleared that up. Actually, I think that there should have been a receivable for that, so I think that is going to get fixed. The other noteworthy is that in the other revenue, there was a budget of $268,673, and included in that was opera money that was budgeted in your general fund. That it doesn't go to the general fund. It's not general fund money, it's special revenue money. So there was a deficit collection of 257. But overall, from your revenue budget of $11,934,591, your total revenues that were brought in were $12,533,444. So your revenue stream increased by $598,853. So that's beautiful. And then in your capital projects, there was an increase. There were increases in some of your capital project funds, and then obviously decreases for expenses like the highway department and equipment fund. And I kind of like to save the capital projects for a second when we talk about your fund balance, and then ways that maybe we can increase your capital projects funds by using some of that fund balance. You have your trust of revenues and your TIF. So the TIF is relatively new. And you have a fund balance in your TIF fund now in 22 of $5,112. So every year that you have your TIF and your commitment is for 23, it was 60,000, right? A little over 60,000. So that gets transferred into your special revenue fund, your TIF fund. And so the balance will it'll grow if you don't expend, if you do nothing with the TIF, if you have no work plan for that. So that money just continually grows.
Oh, they have plenty of plan for that TIF work.
But it has to grow. I mean,
Yeah.
with the balance of $5,000, there's not a whole lot that you're gonna do, but it'll keep growing every commitment year. And then you can probably. So we can talk about that. We can talk about fund balance. So we'll talk about the general fund first. little worksheet. Your fund balance with the 3 million to is exceeds your fund balance policy. Or your, let's talk, your target. I don't know if you're all aware of your fund balance policy, and you have target balance, your 30, you have a 30-day, a 60-day, and a 90, and the 60-day being your target. So you've exceeded that. So, and I did take into consideration your, the amount of money that you put away. So I would rather address the situation in FY 23 as to what we do with that, because 22 obviously is coming on. You've already done your tax commitment for 23. So now you have a chance to look at 23's the estimated fund balance that we see right now. And that is it's unaudited. We have looked at things, but we haven't done the 23 audit fully.
So their target date is between 60 and 90.
So the target in the policy says 60, the maximum says. Our target for RHR Smith is we always recommend between 60 and 90 days.
And how many days? Did you do the
balance.
calculation of how many days?
For 23, I did 30, 60, 90, but you have probably 112. Yeah. So, yeah. So. When I went through in your fund balance for FY 22 was 3,206,617. You had revenues of 13,849,960. I did your transfers in, which means from the special revenue capital and all those other funds transfers into the general fund is 74,605, which gave you revenues of 13,924,565, and then your expenses in FY 23. And I still say this, that they're unaudited, because there could be places where they might be stuck in a liability or an asset somewhere that we need to pull out. The expenses were 12,997,462. So given that, when you net the revenues and the expenses and the fund balance, I came up with $4,133,720 as your estimated fund balance at the end of FY 23. And with that, I assigned $210,750 because that's what you put on your tax commitment to reduce.
So utilization of fund balance.
Yeah, for tax. So that gave me an estimated 3,922,970. And then I assigned $62,490 for the transfer station, and we'll talk about that shortly. Which gave me an estimated unassigned of 3,864,800. So when I took and calculated from your fund balance policy, 30 days of fund balance is 1,106,310. 60 days is $212,620, and 90 days is 3,318,930. So if we took your target, which is 60 days, you have in an excess of 1,647,860. And if we take your maximum, which is the 3,318,930, you have an excess of 541,000. So I think in looking at that, your fund balance policy says that you will take that overage and you'll work with your tax commitment or do something in the interest of the tax. So I think if you are to be able to look at it, and I apologize, I know you don't have your draft. Usually we present when the audits are final, but it's been such a long time. Like, we should at least give you an update, and if you wish, we can certainly come back after you've had a chance to review and finalize and have a conversation. And that's probably best. But when you look at the amounts of money that you have in your capital reserves and what your plan is some of those balances may be low and you may want to increase them. So a way to help the taxpayer may be by taking some of that fund balance that you have and putting it towards your capital reserves. Then there is no. And keep your mill rate level. So as far as the transfer station goes, transfer station didn't fare as well. In when I was estimating your fund balance for 23. The transfer station's fund balance at the end of 22 was 90,705. And then the revenues that came in were 639,971. And the expenses going out were 826,240, which leaves you in a deficit fund balance situation that we estimate at 95,564.
And if you'll recall, part of that issue, and we discussed this at budget committee, because when budget committee looks at the document, they can see, well, we didn't hit that target. And our revenue that year, if you'll recall, when John came in, talked about the year before with all of how wonderful COVID was, with everybody threw everything away and we had high revenue. And we didn't meet that target and it went back down. And how that gets resolved is through fund balance.
Yeah.
So
there was a budget, his budget, and it wasn't the expense. We have to.
Right.
It was not the expense side of the budget that put them in the deficit.
Right.
It was the revenue side.
Okay, and that deficit in the transfer station fund is not Waldeboro's share, it's the entire
It's
fund.
the
correct?
entire
Okay,
deficit.
correct.
So
Yeah.
when I did your fund balance,
Yeah.
estimate at that 62,490 would be Waldeboro's share.
Okay,
So. And also, we can take that and use your overdraft article. And we can, take the general fund balance, and that's why I put that there. To cover that deficit, and then we'll do an accounts receivable to Friendship and Cushing for their balance too.
and then
And we'll make that transfer station full to zero. So you have to look at, so now at the end of 23, we're gonna anticipate that the transfer station's fund balance is zero. Like they have nothing. So you're starting over again, so we need to just kind of watch and see what's going on in FY 24 to make sure that we're not back in the same situation where back to you and say, okay, so, we did this for this and to not have to go to Friendship and Cushing and say, we more.
so the 2024 right now, we're already ahead in our disposal fees. We're more than 50%.
revenue.
Yes, for our revenue
Revenue.
for our disposal
Right.
fees. All the others are pretty well fixed. It's what we get from Friendship and Cushing. It's our transfer in. So we're over 50% halfway through the year, and our busiest time of the year is coming up with spring. So we should be much better in 2024. And John felt terrible, just so everybody's
He
aware.
did.
He did. He felt absolutely terrible.
Where are we at with the capital fund on the transfer station? Do we have any?
So you have 100 there, so I don't know for 23, but I can give you where it's
We
at.
have some in there, though.
There's like $113,000.
All right,
So that's what you have in that capital fund.
Yep.
And we did get all the reimbursement back for the landfill closure.
Correct.
That happened in 23.
In 23, so we haven't,
Well, technically,
yeah, and
it
so.
happened recently.
So the landfill closure has a deficit fund balance, obviously, because the expenses were paid out of there, knowing that but you have monies coming in from the state, so.
Right.
That'll change cycle in 23. Put you in a positive situation. So, but there's a downward trend in transfer station for the last 3 or 4 years. The fund, it's just the revenues have been less and the expenses have been more, and that just every year reduces your fund balance. It went from 21 down to 90, so it wouldn't have been probably in deficit. But it's the revenue shift. And now that you've increased it, maybe you have to look at something differently again as far as your fees come.
Well, they increased the fees and after our budget meeting in our last budget of, so we're talking March of last year, now we're approaching. They did have a rate increase, but they also discussed the pay as you throw.
Yeah, and if I recall, Julie, the problem, part of the problem was that we weren't charging enough for mattress disposal.
Correct, and
And some
just,
of the other items,
and one of the things that John was fearful of is the mattress items now that issue's pretty much gone.
yeah.
Because they've went to their own private hauler.
Okay.
So he was just concerned that that might have affected the revenue stream, but we seem to be doing, like I said, we're over 50% in our revenue so far this year in that disposal line item. So I think you have to realize too, you don't have
Plus
the
the
expense.
expense.
Right.
You have the revenue stream that's doing well, but you also don't have the expense of throwing them away. So
So that's a reduction in the overall budget.
Could be.
could be.
Could be. Not sure you want to do that yet.
But it's,
We want to build up.
but
the
it's
fund
a-
balance
but it's just
bit.
one of those things that when we meet with the budget committee, we have to have a serious conversation about, so. Not that we didn't know it was coming, but. It puts more clarity on it, I think.
So I think, kudos on your fund balance for the general fund, so you're exceeding your expectations. Now you can look at that a little bit.
And take
say-
it to the transfer
and say-
station.
And say, well done, and what do we want to do with the access to follow your fund balance policy? So those are good things. I come with, good news after so many years. Except for the transfer station, yeah, they're just on a downward trend, and hopefully the increase in your fees and things will help catch it up, but
It's-
again, you're starting over.
It's so hard because I know this, and I'm gonna sort of speak a little bit for John Daigle. He has worked so hard to keep it affordable. Because his big fear is if you raise the fees too high, it ends up on the side of the road. And it's such a delicate balance. And it was funny because predicting garbage and the tonnage it's a complicated thing, And we didn't anticipate as much during the quote COVID years, and we were inundated with garbage. And then, okay, so maybe this is the norm now, and then it wasn't the norm. So it's complicated,
And
but
even in those COVID years,
Yeah.
your expenses exceeded your revenues,
Yeah.
because all day long, you can think what your fees are and what you were charging everybody,
Right.
even though your revenue looked really good, you have to look at your expenses.
Right.
So your expenses
Right.
were exceeded there as well, which helped deplete the
Exactly.
transfer station.
and it's
So,
hard. It's
Yeah.
just, it's complicated stuff with garbage. But it'll be a great discussion for our budget committee.
Keep them busy.
It will. It's, we are blessed with a very good budget committee. You've not had the pleasure
I have not.
of meeting with them, but they are an incredibly good group of individuals who come at it with all kinds of different ideas and thoughts and questions. And I think we're unique in that it's not a 1 or 2 meeting kind of a committee. It's a all year round committee. And they stay on top of things and are quite well informed. So it should be a fun time.
So we've kind of looked at 24 a little bit, but we are just like in the investigative stage really to see if we could figure out. We could tell you where they are today, but where they may be at the end of June. So we're gonna work with Julie and Peg and try to come up with a good number.
We will have that for us
And
for budget committee.
Ron has offered to come back and.
He should come back when the budget committee's
Well,
here.
you did ask him about that, so maybe we could do a joint
Yeah.
board budget.
A board
Yeah.
budget committee meeting,
a
fun,
board budget.
fun night with the auditor.
Yeah. Fun night with the auditor.
I think that should be the name of the meeting, fun night with the auditor. But Ron has to come to that one because he's, Ron.
Yeah, he is.
He's Ron.
He's animated. I am just factual. Factual, but. So, that's pretty much it. As an update, we are again working on getting 23 with Peg. So that'll bring us current. The delay in the audits were were just, they were beyond our control, I mean, COVID and the shutdown. People could be places, things.
Life
When,
happens.
yeah, and when the world opened up, everybody was like, hurt, you know, so everybody had to kind of stay in line to whoever. So, you won't see that.
Will we have the numbers that we need to, if we over our 90 days? The numbers that we need to potentially do 25's budget
Yes,
to make the adjustments we need to make,
Yep.
okay?
That isn't the only question.
I think it is.
You could fund balances. Right?
Made us feel pretty comfortable.
Well, it's, you know, it's a lot of hard work.
I think when Bob and I started on the board 9 years ago, I think we was what, 45, 47 days?
Yeah.
That's all we had.
That was right. Yeah,
Can
we
you
always thought,
imagine? Can you imagine?
yeah,
I wonder what
taking
the
us-
daily budget was then, because I was saying that when I started, it was like a $24,000 a day budget, and now it was
38.
38, so it costs $38,000 a day to run the town operations, so. That
very
imagine,
different.
you know, that's pretty significant, that
Yeah.
over 100 now.
We've done it in what, 9 years?
Yeah.
Gotten us above and beyond what we have hoped for.
Yeah, I mean, you've exceeded and, yeah. So you'll have that difference and how, what your plan is.
I'm sure we will have lots of discussion about that.
It makes a difference having a town manager who's been with us for a while, instead of doing the rotating tear thing, which we did for a while in this town. And this is, the stability has been really helpful. It gives you consistency and lets you see the bigger picture.
Love Julie Ray to death and so glad that she's still here, but it's like with Peg too and having that consistency as
Mhm.
well. You know, I know the front part sometimes it was a changeover, but
Mhm.
consistency is key and helps.
Consistency is key and
And improvements, and I have to say that also. So
improvements.
we have,
It's a ship and sometimes turning that ship takes a few years.
it does.
Takes some discipline.
And it takes
It takes-
discipline.
I have a great relationship with Peg and Julie, you know, we talk often. When there are problems, actually, we also do the bank reconciliations, and so we talk, you know, and when there are problems, they reach out. All the, you know, and we solve them before it gets to, you know, to a level that it doesn't. need to be, But the level of understanding and the things that we ask for in audit and the things that we used to have to do for journal entries and the amount of journal entries that we used to do is it lessens every, you know, because they're teaching moments and learning moments that are learned and done.
Peg used to have this great saying, and I don't remember it, Peg, but you started out with training wheels.
Yeah, that was talking about my own path as a finance director. And then I said I was a toddler, a finance director, toddler, and then I think I hit puberty. I don't know where I am right now.
You're college girl again.
Graduating high school, moving on to college. After that, she won't need me in life.
But it's been a process. It's been 7 years
It
and
has been a process.
it's been 7 years
Has it been
and
7
it
years?
has been 7 years.
7 years.
You've been here 5.
I've been here 5. You were here.
I've been here 7 years. You've been 5. You
5
were
years.
my demand. I said, send us the hardest one you've got. The one that, you know, is hard. We want the hard one.
Cool. Anybody else get any other questions?
Oh, good news.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. As
So,
always, it was a
We'll
pleasure.
talk and reschedule the
Yes.
next meeting, once probably, let's finalize, we'll get these finalized and we'll get them binders so that binded copies so that you can all see what hours.
You need to get home. You've been here since 9 o'clock this morning.
So, I don't send it to you now.
Don't trip on that.
I will. Thank you,
Peggy.
Karen. You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen, so much.
Nice to see everyone.
Thank you.
For blood pathogen, I could. Thanks, sure. Fuck.
All right, we'll move along to archaeology presentation. Believe that would be, oh, it's Bill? Well,
Start.
you're starting, okay.
Reaction.
You've saved the best for last, is that what you're saying?
Right, well, I was gonna say that, age before beauty. But, Bill Maxwell, President Waldeboro Historical Society. I'll be brief because we have budget season coming up and some new people around here are gonna have to listen to me then. So, as President of Waldeboro Historical Society, I'm here to share some thoughts and information with you. You're gonna hear some information from a couple of gentlemen to help the select board make an informed decision about the possibility of creating an origins ordinance. And I'd like to share with you 2 of 7 parts of the purpose that are spelled out in the Historical Society bylaws. One is to promote the marking of historical sites. And 2 is to promote the study and love of history of the region known as Broad Bay and Waldeboro, spelled with the UGH. The Historical Society Museum, we're the stewards of thousands of artifacts pertaining to the history of Waldeboro. But we as a town have thousands of unknown and undiscovered artifacts all over town. When any of us here in this room would like to learn about Waldeboro, we have limited resources. We can go to the museum, obviously. You can go to Dr. Stahl's Volume 1 and Volume 2. We have Miller's History of Waldeboro. You can go to any publication that Mark Bisco, Esther Gross, or Gene Lawrence might have written about. Or we talk to our elders in town, but sadly, we lose our elders before things are documented. Generational stories over time seem to grow, but many pieces are left out of the story over the time. So it's very possible that an ordinance would help answer old and new questions pertaining to Waldeboro. Now, while working with Harvey Mitchell over the last few years, I've been fortunate to help uncover some information about Waldeboro that I never knew. And that would have been possible if Harvey wasn't out there digging. Then in conversations, we talked about, Harvey likes to say, what's next? So we talked and talked, and then we talked with Mr. Butler. And then we talked some more. And then in this very room, many months ago, we met with Bob and Julie and talked about some ideas. So the idea of maybe a committee or, until recently, maybe even an ordinance could come of this. I would like to point out a few sections of the town's comprehensive plan. Chapter 4, environmental management, Chapter 11, goals, policies and strategies, and excerpts from the comprehensive plan dated 2018 under historical cultural resources. Now, I'm not going to take up any time and read all that, but I do ask you, the selectmen, to review them. Those sections are supported by the Historical Society. I think if we go with an ordinance, it could be beneficial to the planning board, possibly to the town acquiring grant money, but that's questions I'm sure Julie or Max could answer. Closing, I just want you to know that you have the support of the Historical Society, and we will collaborate with the town in any way. Now I'll turn it over to Harvey Mitchell.
You know me from several occasions. folks at home don't know me, so I'll just give you a quick introduction. My name is Harbor Mitchell. I have a 20 to 30-year history with commercial and research archaeology in the state of Maine. And I have 2 degrees, one in biology and one in anthropology. I am a retired United Methodist pastor as well. And that's pretty much my last 30 years. For the last 3 years, I've given myself to Waldoboro's archaeology for 2 reasons. To test 2 hypotheses. One, that the town has colonial and post-colonial archaeology, and that archaeology is viable, capable of supporting research. Those things are true. The work that I've done proves that out. The other piece is, I like Waldoboro. Waldoboro has I would dare say, a unique opportunity. I don't know of any town in the state of Maine that would have 200 or 300 colonial or immediately post-colonial archaeological sites that will probably support research. Most towns are built right on top of each other. You know, their old town is underneath their new town. It's all gone. Yours is not. It's all sitting along the river and on the valley walls. Some of it in driveways, some of it in backyards, some of it in open fields. And it dates back, the colonial piece dates back probably as early as 1700. Waldoboro has prehistoric or pre-European archaeology as well. I was blessed to be able to work on a site in the area of Orf's Corners about 25, 30 years ago that dates 10 to 12,000 years old. That's what Waldoboro has. And it's sitting there, but it's going to get lost. It's going to be built on. It's going to be dug up for gravel. It's going to be stripped for loam, and it's within inches of the surface. So that's what I am, and that's what I do. And I've heard myself called to do this for the last 3 years. And my piece, in terms of this effort, an ordinance and a development of some structure to start to look at that, is done. But I offer myself up to the group and to the town to continue to do that work as called to do it. I want to take the last 2 minutes of my 5 minutes of time, thank you, Bob, to answer any specific questions that you might have of me. And I'm deafer than a stone tonight, so I'll have to come closer to you if you have a question.
Ready to get any questions? I got one.
Go.
What do you envision as an ordinance?
As an ordinance, well, I think what's before us is really the development of a committee. The
Okay.
ordinance is designed to put that committee
Yeah.
in process.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any specific rules, regulations, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
As I understand, the comprehensive plan identifies a group needs to be put together, not a legislative body, not but not ad hoc.
Yeah.
It's structural. Yeah. So,
Now, what would I'm just trying to figure out, as an archaeological site, would you put stuff in place to stop a development? Or would you want to go in and remove what you could if a site was
yeah,
found?
those are all possible. It's up to the town. I don't have to say one way or the other what happens on private land.
Yeah, but I'm just curious
Like,
of
for
where
instance,
this is gonna
your
go.
property, if I know you're on the corner of Jefferson and Mill,
Yep.
okay. 1857, there was a redware pottery there. So somewhere in your backyard is full of what we call wasters.
Yep.
So that's an archaeological site.
Yep.
And it's yours.
Yep.
So if you wanted to be in relationship with me in a conversation about, what would you do with that? What does that look like? When you have a more formal structure,
Yep.
you can have a better conversation.
Yep. Yep.
As a town and
Yep.
so forth.
I'm just curious what,
Oh, yeah,
You know-
yeah, a lot of people are quite concerned, archaeology is a new thing for
Yep.
just about everybody.
Yep.
What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my ability to build a garage?
right,
That kind of
exactly.
stuff.
Yep,
Yeah, exactly.
Bill?
Michael will be able to answer a lot more of those in-depth questions I had. And he was nice enough to come up with somewhat of a structure.
Anything else? Did you all get a chance to read what I added to the handout? I don't know if that. Did they all get a copy of it?
Was emailed.
Did we get a handout? We didn't get
I
it.
had 6 or 8 pages that I
Yeah.
had.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure to take paper.
No, we did not.
Okay, well, have it, take the time to read it,
Yes.
you know, that'll give you my piece of it.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you, Harbor.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, I'm going to close.
We're gonna remember.
My name is Michael Amico, and I'm a resident of Waldoboro. I'm so happy to be taking this podium for the first time after being in the room for so long. So I'll just review after the general, more specific, and even more specific introduction here tonight that we put together an ordinance for the formation of a new town committee. So we are asking the select board to approve for it to be put on the warrant for the town meeting so that voters can choose to establish the committee as a town. And we understand that there is a more casual way of forming a new town committee. The select board can just create it. But we feel that by putting it on the warrant, that it signals to the town that this is a town effort. And we want to create town buy-in and awareness of this project. And so we wrote an ordinance for the creation of this committee, and that's what we would want the citizens to know about and vote on. The comprehensive plan was cited. This committee is something that was suggested to be formed a few years back. And we have the buy-in of the Historical Society. We have the work that's already been done by Harbor. And I just want to speak, Abden, to your question about, you know, what happens when you find material on your land. So I'm a property owner in Waldoboro, and I worked with Harbor, and we after a survey was done of our land, the survey marked that there was a stone foundation. And that was the first I had heard about it. I just thought it was a pile of rocks that I walked by. And so I said, Harbor, would you want to come out and look at it? And he did. And immediately he said, this is an 18th century foundation. And so I said, okay, what next? Well, we can put in what are called test pits. These are basically like 1 foot by 1 foot holes in the ground. And it's done in a very systematic way, shoveling, placing the dirt, sifting the dirt, replacing the dirt, and then bagging all the little what is called cultural material, pottery shards and other things, in a bag, and then those are cleaned. And what Harbor gives you back is this array of pieces of the past. In fact, we found almost whole plates from the late 18th century on my land that were broken, and then immediately after, dirt was put on top of them so that they weren't broken even further. So what we discovered was not just almost a whole plate, but a moment in time when the plate was broken, with people standing just there, you know, over 200 years ago. I own all the material that we find on the land. I'm the one who says whether to dig, how much to dig. And I think that simply increasing the awareness of material in people's land is almost enough at this stage. But in closing, I just wanted to point out that the vision here is much broader than just the archaeology. What is so special about this resource is that we usually think about history as stories that we tell. Oh, did you know that this happened here and this happened there? But they're told and retold that we kind of lose the materiality and the specificity or the evidence of them. But what archaeology is about is to say, well, yes, but it happened right there. And that is the remain of that story or that person or that event. And by pointing to the remains, we can begin talking about experiences, what people did in their daily lives, and even what they felt, the kind of emotional dimensions of people's lives. Anger, fear, joy, pride, basic emotions that shape people's lives, especially the earliest settlers of this area, and that I would argue still shape people in this place today. And so what we're doing with archaeology is opening up an emotional space to rethink who we are living here today and how we connect to this broader past, which also includes the future. And I think that returning to these very basic human questions of survival, of creating a home, of working, on a daily basis to survive, brings us back to, well, our basic humanity. And in very, very emotionally divisive times in which we live, I feel that asking into this larger emotional dimension of humanity is not only crucial, but can act as a model for other towns and other places. So I think this could be the beginning of the writing of a new communal history, a new stage of understanding and integrating our past as a space that continues to hold us in the present. But in closing, I'll say, with increasing development and systems upgrades and just the lack of knowledge of what's in your lawn, we will very, very quickly lose this opportunity. And so we wanted to act before it's too late. Thank you very much.
Anybody got any questions, Bob?
Yeah, I just want to address what I felt you were raising as a concern about the propriety of people coming in and digging up your yard.
Well, the reason why I say that is people, if they don't feel threatened, they're more apt to allow whatever anybody wants to do.
Yeah.
As long as they're not threatened with their property.
Let me read the last section of this proposed ordinance.
Mhm. I didn't see it. I didn't receive it
Yeah.
for some reason.
I think this will address your concerns, Adam. This ordinance does not impose any restrictions on property owners. It does not compel specific actions or measures. The committee exists solely to collaborate with interested parties to provide information and assistance, while also serving the town's planning and select boards as a resource and sounding board for historical and archaeological information.
Okay.
So it's there as a structure to permit folks who have archaeological and historical expertise. Michael is a PhD in history from Yale. This guy knows emotional history. He knows what he's talking about. And you could tell just listening to him talk. It really brings together some very interesting currents that this is a snapshot in time. 50 years from now, this will be gone.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity for the town to collaborate and participate if they want to. If they don't want to, that's up to them. But for those who do, it's an opportunity to have a resource available, an actual committee.
Yep.
As a reference point.
Right.
To go out and do some interesting things. Harvard dug up my place.
Yep.
And
I
sorry.
excavated.
There you go.
Research. They didn't dig up your place.
I will tell you, Sally did not feel threatened.
No, she did not. But you found
1730.
3 sites, one down near the water
Yeah.
that was abandoned,
the first year.
one up near the road that dated back to the 1750s and 60s.
The one up by the road edge?
Yes.
Late 60s, early 70s.
Yep. And then one down between the two on the brow of the hill overlooking the river that probably goes back to the first owner of the property. And
Yeah.
we're not sure whether it was a fortification or a combination of different things. We think it probably was, correct me if I'm wrong, Harbor. It probably was a structure, a fairly large structure, given the size of the latrine that we uncovered.
Yeah, it was a big latrine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it was a place for people to take refuge in the event of an attack. This was during the French and Indian War that this thing was put up.
Right.
And one of the unusual features that blew my mind was, maybe 5 inches below the surface, there was this foundation of stones, large stones. And it was probably 8 by 8, 10 by 10.
Well, yeah, it's been spread a little bit, so
Yep.
closer to 6 by 6, but
And
shouldn't
the
be big.
question was, what is this? Why is this here?
Yeah,
And the first thought was maybe it was for oxen, because you need to have a big sturdy floor with a strong foundation
Yeah.
to support the weight of oxen.
Yeah.
So maybe there were oxen in there. Then the thought occurred, well, could have been the base for a mortar emplacement. It had a perfect view of the river. You could see them coming at you and you could use the mortars if you needed to defend yourself. Or it might have been the base of a hearth.
Yeah.
That was never really used because the building was there in case of an emergency.
Yeah.
All of this stuff comes to the surface. And it was fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, anybody who has something like this on their property, I would encourage them to follow their curiosity to see where it leads them. I had no idea you might have some shards in your backyard.
No, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I found
Wow, having
interesting
the
things
pottery
back there.
That's
You
amazing.
found what?
Interesting things,
Those are clamshell dad.
Yeah,
especially with the river changing, moving and stuff like that,
Sure.
stuff being exposed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we've had some serious floods. I've been there. September would be 31 years in that
I'd
same
love
house.
to put a hole in your backyard.
I don't have a problem with
You
it.
have to dig up your yard.
But
sorry about
the
it.
brook-
Harbor. I didn't
the
mean to
brook
say
and
you
the
dug
river
it
have
up. You
changed a
did.
lot.
His methodology is very exacting and it is very careful, just as Michael described.
Yep.
Foot by a foot, and you go down and you see what you got, and you sift it. Bill's done a lot of work himself in this.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating, so.
Yeah.
I believe my house. The house out behind me was built in 1828. I
Yeah.
think mine was there before that.
Yours was there before that.
The corner posts in my house are made of hemlock trees. The bark is still on the
Yeah.
tree. It's just hewed out on the inside.
It's listed on the 1857 map is right there at that corner.
Yep.
So it could be the potter's house.
Yep.
Which means that your yard might have been his kilns.
Yep.
And the clay right in the stream and so forth may have been the source of his
Yep.
clay.
Yep.
But that's Waldeboro's own pottery that it's making in the
Yep.
1850s, 1840s.
Yep.
And it's pretty special.
So at this point, are we looking to, like Michael said, get it on the
June ballot.
June ballot? For the citizens to make a decision on.
Yep.
forming this committee?
I think we're really in the early stages of this discussion. You know, I've read through the ordinance. And I had a couple of things that stood out for me. One was the creation of districts, I think, was in there.
Zones.
Zones, yes, and that can get very contentious.
And a lot of people can get upset with it.
Yes, so I think there has to be a lot more development to the ordinance that can address some of those issues. And one of the suggestions that I might have is that we need to define the interested parties. There's obviously archaeologists here,
Yeah.
but we haven't heard from the realtors either.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard from the builders.
Right.
All of whom are gonna have interests in this ordinance. So I think taking a vote today is premature. And then on another note, I have an archaeological thing for you to investigate on my property.
You do.
I do. There is an oak tree behind my cottage. And in that oak tree are the blades of two scythes that are embedded in the oak.
They hung them up.
They hung them up.
Civil
And poking around, I found the stabs that were attached to those scythes
There you go.
underneath.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
You're willing to have them if you
It's
want.
everywhere, Michael. Yeah, I hear what you're saying around the idea of what Abden was referring to. This is something that people are not very familiar with in terms of the idea of it, where it is, what it is, how to work with it. I think it's important to recognize that the town has already said it wants it protected in its comprehensive plan. It actually says to protect archaeology in the town of Waldeboro. So I'm not sure that, and not to dispute your, in any way what your concerns are. The idea of interested parties is informational and relational. That's the need, because the legislative piece to do it is already in the comprehensive plan. I'll just read it to you real quick. This is the Historic and Cultural Resources section. And the goals of this section are preserve and protect our archaeological resources. That's what it says. So I'm just reading what you've already voted on,
Okay, it's already
Yeah.
been voted,
but
so
Presumably this was
we're
back.
extending this.
I think. it's
Where's the end
important
point? Where's the end point?
For the relationship piece, since it's between non-legislative relationship and private landowners. To understand this and just, this is informational. If you don't want anything done on your land, nothing happens on your land. That's the bottom line. Because only a town has the ability to vote its own regulations, unless they're state or federal, which is a whole nother issue. But this is the same as, you know, can I paint a picture of your house? I can or I can't, it's up to you. As Michael put it, it's about private land ownership and personal relationship. So the history is the history. It is what it is, where it is. And if somebody doesn't want anything done with it, then they don't. You know, I'm not gonna fight about that. You know, it's not a contentious issue for me. It's really about, I have a certain skill set and a certain gift. And if somebody wants me to do that and use that gift in order to preserve or to remove or excavate, for the Historical Society to archive or to curate so that the town has its history, I'm happy to do it. But it's not about top down. But I hear what you're saying.
I also think that what you're suggesting, Mike, is that what is the end game for the word zones in terms of regulation? And the word as we're using it there was simply to say this is an area that was developed or settled at a certain time period, and it's different from this other area that was settled at a different time period. And so it's more educational. It's more about awareness that, oh, you're living in an area of what was called Leverett, right? The earliest settlement. Did you know that? That was the purpose of the language of zone.
Yeah.
It's just as like Bill would say that the Historical Society helped designate a historical area of Waldoboro. It's not under preservation law, and no one is required to build a certain way or not build.
Well, is there a trigger to preservation law
Well, I believe
that would trigger either state or federal protections?
Yes, I see what you're asking, and I don't know the precise answer, but as far as I understand it, it's would have to be the select board or some town entity that decides whether they're gonna, or businesses that are going to create a historic zone or something that regulates itself. I mean, this is simply for awareness of areas of history.
Yeah, let me clarify something. The state has no jurisdiction over your property. None, unless,
Unless they take it by eminent domain. Unless they take it by eminent domain.
yes, they can, but that has nothing to do with archaeology. Archaeology is not a mechanism by which the state has ever taken anything by eminent domain, to my knowledge. And then, yes, you're absolutely right. Maybe some lawyer can come up
Look
with a
up
reason
the
to do
Kelso
that.
case,
But
the Kelso
ultimately,
Supreme Court case.
ultimately, the idea of having any kind of conversation around a subject matter has to be framed. Because one of the first questions somebody's gonna ask me is, well, where is it? It's easier to have that conversation when you actually can say, well, here's where it is. So if the town adopts a archaeological district or not, it's still gonna be in that same area. And I would still answer the question, where is it? Well, it's between Route 32 and it's Route 220. Because that's where Waldoboro started. So whether we identify it as a zone and make it formalized in its name or not, the concept of having some preservation or some research or some relationship to Waldoboro's historic resources still going to happen in that same area. So the landowners within that area are still gonna be the focus of whatever it is the town wants to have done, which is spelled out by the comprehensive plan. So, I mean, it doesn't have to have a name, but it's still gonna be in the same place. You know, Abden's backyard is still Abden's backyard, whether it's in a historic zone or not. So if he wants to put a garage in, he wants to see if there's archaeology, he can call me. I'm happen to be on the.
With or without an ordinance, he can
Uh,
call, with or without this ordinance, he can call you.
Absolutely.
Without this ordinance, I just told you about sides on my property.
Yes,
I don't see what the objective of an ordinance is.
well, I get what you're
I
saying.
see,
I would encourage you to,
But I just want to say that the ordinance
Yeah.
is to establish a committee.
Yeah.
To educate people about the area's archaeology, and if they're interested, to contact us to help them. That was the only law.
I would just identify that the committee is already defined. And its goals and purposes are defined within the comprehensive plan.
But I don't think we need a,
It's-
just like, we don't need an ordinance to create a committee. This board here creates the committee.
So you can, I mean, that's another alternative.
Yeah, John?
Yeah, that's, I think that's the word we're getting wrapped around the tree here, the word ordinance. When you think of ordinance, you think of a rule, a law. So what you're asking for, if I understand you correctly, you're asking for us to present to the voters to see who would be the interest in forming an archaeological committee. Not an ordinance, an archaeological committee.
Yeah.
At that point in June, they say, yes, we do.
Yeah.
We, as the select board, we form an archaeological committee
Absolutely.
made up by whoever wants to join.
I think the thinking behind the idea of ordinance, and correct me, Michael, if I'm wrong, was that sometimes, I mean, after 10 years as a pastor, I recognize that if there isn't connection, hierarchical structural connection, things get lost. Right? I mean, the comprehensive plan is 6 years old. And the town, I don't think, has done anything in terms of that action item.
But Harper, can I just
But-
clarify? Let me just clarify. So
Yeah.
The reason for forming the town committee was to be able to be in conversation with other committees and with the workings of the town in terms of the transfer of knowledge. That's the reason for the committee.
Structural
Yeah,
connection.
but the reason for asking to do it through, by voters choosing to have this committee was just to get more buy-in, to say that we, the citizens, would like this committee, as opposed to just having the select board say,
Right.
let's form.
I
a
certainly
committee.
understand that.
That's the
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
difference we're
Yeah.
talking about here.
I mean, you want to know what we're doing. I say we, I may or may not even be on it, but certainly the town wants to stay in touch with that. So how does that do that normally? Well,
select
usually
board-
it's hierarchical.
Well, normally the select board appoints the committee.
Right.
You're creating an extra step that we're not used to.
Oh, I see.
So
Yeah.
the only committee that's ever been created
Yeah.
by the select board is the budget committee. Every other committee is appointed by the select board. And I think I understand it's for public awareness, but here that gives it more authority by taking it to the voter almost than it does by the select board just appointing a committee.
Gotcha.
And in your effort to make it look more
Connected.
connected, you're making it look more authoritative.
Right. Well, this, I think what Michael is saying, I mean, if you have this body that is in somebody's imagination capable of telling you what you can or
Right.
cannot do,
Right,
whether that's true or not. then it
right.
defeats the purpose.
Perception is, it's sometimes, yes.
So
So
how would a normal committee, if you
just the
not ad
select
hoc,
board,
The
how
select
would
board,
it connect to the town so that the town is aware of what it's doing? Does it have to report to the town? Does it have?
if it's created
Yeah.
by so essentially you could take that ordinance and that could be the charge that the select board gives to the committee.
Well, there, okay. I mean, if the board is capable of making that committee, then it doesn't need to be in the form of an ordinance.
I'm just
Yeah.
going by that. The description of what the impetus was behind the ordinance was to get more buy-in, which
Yeah,
I
correct.
get.
Yeah.
But typically, it's, and I think that's where you're feeling the little bit of pushback is typically the committee, somebody would come and ask the select board to appoint the committee and it not go to the voter. I get what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
We have that authority to create a committee.
Yeah.
We don't need to go to the voters to do that, and
Well, there you go. As long as you can
and
stay
we
connected.
and
to
we
them.
actually
'Cause
set
I
the
am
select
so
board.
familiar with bodies,
Mhm.
congregations,
Mhm.
who say somebody ought to do that.
Yeah.
And then something happens and years down the road, whatever happened to that? And you've lost touch.
Yeah.
So if you all can, if the board and the town can stay in relationship to that committee and know what it's thinking, what it's talking about, what its ideas are in terms of where it might go with maybe a zone or whatever it might be.
Yep.
It's 6 of one, half done the other.
Yep.
As far as I'm concerned.
And the
Whatever makes
select
them
board,
feel
and the select
comfortable.
board can also give those committees direction.
Yeah.
Of where they want that
Sure,
committee to
because it's-
go.
Right, it's defined by
Right.
comprehensive plan and other documentation, yeah.
Bob?
The select board changes every single year. I mean, if that's a fact. And relying on a changing body to look for and implement the consistency that history and archaeology require isn't gonna happen. 5 years from now, there may be 5 people sitting at this table who don't give a fig about history and archaeology. And we know that's true. And it'll probably happen. But if you've established the committee by ordinance, there's a difference. You've institutionalized the committee. And that's an important step. That's why I argue in favor of the ordinance that establishes the committee. The ordinance is very, very clear in black and white. Don't mess with my property unless you let me mess with your property. Very clear. I don't see how you could argue against that. It's an invitation to people who have expertise to come in and tell you what you've got.
But it's,
And it's a standing committee created by ordinance by the will of the people because they acknowledge and recognize the importance of archaeology and history to the community. We've established an historical society in part to acknowledge that. So I'm supporting this. I mean, I can tell I'm losing the argument here, but I think I'm losing it for the wrong reason.
but
I'm
that's the
losing it.
same
Let me
problem
finish
you're
here.
going to have.
Let me finish. I don't care what the problem is. I don't think we ought to be sitting here to decide this.
No.
If we lose the vote, we can still create the committee.
But that's,
If we lose the vote, we can still create the committee.
but then you've already antagonized,
You've already lost. folks.
you've already lost.
We've already antagonized people talking about it. If they're gonna be antagonized, if
But-
they're gonna be
But
antagonized. we've
Bob,
already
but
done
that's,
it.
If it would help the board.
The horse has left the barn.
Bob and I know each other pretty well now.
but I think the
I
problem,
would say that Bob and I disagree. If the committee, if the board is capable of generating. However you do that, I don't know how you do it, but building a committee. It's done. If the connection can be made, it's done. Because the comprehensive plan already requires you to do it.
The comprehensive plan is a suggestion, it's not a requirement.
No, it's a goal and it had a short-term agenda and the select board was supposed to do
Yeah.
it. So
We got.
you
we're in
have that
support of it.
directive.
We are in support of the idea, yeah. Go ahead.
I'll go with Bill first.
Well, I appreciate the discussion. You guys are very busy. This has taken a lot longer than it should have, I think. As I said at the beginning, it's a discussion you guys need to have.
Absolutely.
The Historical Society.
Yep.
Support you in any decision you make.
Yep.
I know where the ordinance kind of came from.
Oh, I
Thanks.
gotcha.
So I support it though. I like the wording and that, like Bob read at the end, landowner don't want to, we're not gonna go back on door and say we want to dig up. the pond. That's not
Yep.
gonna happen.
but
But it's a discussion you guys need to have in later.
Correct.
You know, I mean, you guys wanna be out of here. I know that.
I would really appreciate something a precedent to any vote that we take on an ordinance. I would like,
This part,
I would-
preferable to.
Taking a vote.
precedent to, before we take a vote. I would like to know whether there are any state or federal laws that would be triggered by by the committee.
Yeah.
That's all I want
Yeah.
to know.
Not to my knowledge.
Max?
Yeah.
Did you have
I
something?
mean, I've worked for Maine Historic Preservation for 20, 30 years. And I'm not aware of anything that isn't already state regulated, as in development of 40 acres, 100 acres, shoreline zone, things of those natures.
Max?
Yeah, he beat me to a good chunk of those, actually.
Okay.
No, I was just giving my 2 cents on the whole thing. First, on the comprehensive plan, yes, that is one of the stated goals that should be worked towards. It doesn't mean we need to have an ordinance necessarily. In fact, I had to deal with this question very recently of, do we have to create an ordinance versus creating bylaws? As you said, the select board can just create the committee and create the bylaws that has the very restrictions that Mike was just talking about a moment ago. That
Absolutely.
has the restrictions that you already have in the ordinance. An ordinance to me is when you are creating the overlay district that then gets into zoning and requirements that's already in the land use ordinance, which we have the historic village district, which, we don't have to use that often, but it's there and it's voted on by the town, but it's a process to get there. So I don't know how much my weight goes into this. And it's probably going to break someone's back if they try to carry the whole weight, but I don't see any reason the committee can't be started now. And if they want to create some overlay district, that's then the buy-in that the town has to give because of all the work they put into it. And there was probably one more bit that I had in there, but well, even if they made recommendations to improve the current zoning for historic village district, that's something they can then work with the planning board about as when they have some items to present. I think you hear the word ordinance and people are gonna get a bit jumpy, especially with the camper ordinance that's been in the works. And I'm saying that because Mark is listening in the back. So I like the idea of this group. It's a great goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't think we need an ordinance to do it.
I'd rather get to them working right now. That's my 2 cents.
I don't have a problem with that.
I agree.
I just have one more.
Go ahead,
comment.
Bob.
If you attended the last planning board meeting, you would have heard them go through a checklist of things for a particular site that they were planning on putting a solar farm on. 2 of the things on that checklist concerned archaeology. We're already doing this. If you're worried about restrictions or noticing things, it's already in our planning ordinance. This is doing nothing in addition to that. And in fact, it's not doing anything.
It's duplicative,
Other than-
as you said. You
No,
just
it's
said
not-
that it
it's not-
exists
it's-
already
this
and
is
it's
different.
duplicative.
It's not like, this is a different intention, very different intention. And I mean, Harvard disagrees about the vehicle. But Harvard hasn't seen how things get lost in the mix. How people forget things or they just lose importance. And I think having a committee keeps your focus and keeps the wheel turning. And what you said earlier about these sites being lost is very true. So I do support the creation of the ordinance. I think that's important. I've said my piece.
That's okay, never mind.
Sorry.
So
But you'd be okay with the development of a committee.
Absolutely.
do we do that tonight or do we want to hold off and wait?
That
Let
is
this-
totally up to the select
let
board.
this Sink in?
I make a motion to table this until next meeting, to take any
Is there a second?
further action on
I
it.
second.
I'll second the motion.
All right, all those in favor? All right, we'll table it. We're tabling it until the next meeting,
Nice.
so we can have time to digest this.
I think it's
Does that
good to make
sound
sure you
good?
read, if you can get a copy of what it was, I think, was sent to the town.
He has it right here in front of him.
I looked at my emails. I didn't get it in my emails.
I made sure Pam gave him a copy, so it's written down.
All right, super, thanks, Anthony.
Yep. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you, Mike.
Would anybody have a problem if we
I'll
move
let you know.
item 11.1
You
to,
don't need to
Thanks,
dig, I've
right
already
now.
got that stats in my garage.
so that
A
Peg
lot
Peg
of
can
men
go
hung
home?
up their sides during the Civil War, and they never came home. And that's how they end up growing in those trees.
Adjustments to the agenda. Our town manager would like to move Peg up.
11.1.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. So we'll put her under,
Well, she is, if we could just do her, get her moving out right now,
okay, would, does
Um,
anybody
a
object?
long day of auditing.
All right, Peg. What do we
We
get
have
going
the
on?
safety policy and bloodborne
So
pathogens.
Last meeting, you guys had the safety, the revised safety, employee safety manual and bloodborne pathogens policies given to you. I don't know if you remember, but in August, we had, actually, on all of 2023, the safety committee had made revisions on the policy, and that you had blessed it and signed off on it in August, but at the end of August, Bob had some very good suggestions on edits. And then I also got another suggestion on an edit for part of the manual that other towns recommend. So that was what you had seen last meeting. So sorry, I wasn't here to talk about that. But that was the part for the, I don't know if you had any questions on the safety manual. It seemed like you guys have a little bit of back and forth. Did you have something on that?
Yes, the only back and forth I had was why is only the CDL drivers going to get a urinalysis and a drug test if they get
So
an
the
accident?
town, in the spring, the town also has a drug and alcohol plan. So it's all geared towards the regulations for the CDL driver. And for the town, we only have CDL drivers in public works. Because you probably know that the fire department doesn't require them for.
I think that's
And
John's
that
question. I
was
think
my
that's John's
point.
Question.
That's my point is, we're requiring a public works guys driving the big old trucks with their CDL license. If they get an accident, a reportable accident, a serious accident, they're going to get tested. Those fire trucks are big, heavy old trucks too.
Right.
Just because that driver doesn't have, because the state recognizes the fact we don't have firefighters, volunteer firefighters.
Right.
If they get in an accident, they should be held to the same standard.
So I
as
can
a
tell you,
CDL.
as far as accidents for the town of Waldeboro, if there's any accident involving a vehicle that's owned by the town of Waldeboro, we have an outside service come in. An outside, the county would come and do, so it wouldn't be the town's per se, staff, like Waldeboro's PD, but they would go through whatever.
But are they
routines that
giving
would
a
need to go.
urinalysis?
Yeah, and a lot of towns are very cautious about that because of what it could do to somebody's information. It's not something that you see on, well, that's like a trust issue, like
Well,
you
it's-
didn't trust.
It's like a company policy. If I have my own private company. And I want to put in my private company that anyone that gets in an accident with my company vehicles, I'm gonna have you tested. I can do that as an employee,
Yeah.
employer.
So as far as municipalities go, there's caution around that, the people's Fourth Amendment rights and. That's just what I heard, as far as that goes.
But the Fourth Amendment's thrown out when you're a CDL driver.
I don't make the rules.
I'm just saying.
No, but I'm saying-
I'm thinking,
Are you guys saying you'd like us to explore including the fire department in that?
Or all employees,
All
all employees, all
All
town employees in a
employees.
town vehicle.
Okay. We
So
can
it's all-
explore that and get back
Yeah,
to
I
you.
mean, a reportable accident.
We have.
Yeah, you have the drug pool, but I'm talking about an accident. Drug pool, I'm not talking about putting all the employees in the drug pool, because that's CDL stuff. I'm talking about if they have a reportable accident.
and I think one thing that was brought up was a price range of how much that vehicle
In a reportable accident.
reportable accident, if it's 5,000 or
Yeah.
if it's 30,000, there's a huge difference.
Though to a drug pool, I'd have to have an arrangement with a company that says, okay, you're gonna go,
No, he's not talking about random. He's talking about,
I'm not random. I'm talking about,
About there's an accident and I have to.
Right.
Like, think about the actual process. If somebody was in a car accident, I'm like, okay, well, I've got to make an appointment for so-and-so to
Right,
go
yeah.
to such and such a place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would need to have that kind of an arrangement.
We can look at it.
That may be no different than one of the public work guys. Puts a plow truck into a tree, he's gonna go have to take it to your houses, right?
Yeah, he would have
Yeah.
to.
Or if I'm driving a fire truck and I get into a tree. I don't have to take it, I don't have to go take it.
According to what I know on the laws, no, you don't have to.
Right.
But let's check to see if we can require it and what that would look like.
I did check with our loss control person when I heard that this was brought up, and that's what I already
Okay.
told you, that it wasn't something that was widely used
Remember,
because of that.
remember the roast story,
The what?
the roast story. Just because it's always been done a certain way doesn't mean it has to be done that way.
No, I'm not saying anything about.
So we will
always
explore
done.
that. In the
Talking about
meantime,
Loss control guy that I use all the time for stuff.
yes, Bob.
I was just gonna suggest, we approved the safety policy at our last meeting.
You're
Right, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did, and on the proviso that if we needed to make changes that you're suggesting, or look at things you're suggesting, we would do that, but we can do that at any time.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure if you had other specific
Right,
questions
we want
that
to
you
do
had.
pathogens policy tonight, don't we?
Yes.
Get that
The
done.
pathogens
Yes.
would be lovely.
So,
I thought you did everything.
No,
last
just
time.
the
no, we
safety.
didn't do the
No, we didn't do the
pathogens
blood
policy.
test.
Oh, okay.
So I would move that we approve the pathogens policy as changed.
Okay.
Since the last time we looked at it in August.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion on it? Seeing none, all those in favor? Good, that is done.
You
You,
could sign the pages that would be lovely.
I'm sure Pam has them.
okay,
Thank you.
And just before Peg goes, because she's captive. I hope, I know that all of you got this amazingness of what the auditor said tonight. And I appreciated your comments about me. But I'm nothing without my team.
Mhm.
And, you know, Peg's been with me my entire tenure, and I literally could not have done it without her. And she's a gem. You know, she puts in the time, and I just wanted to say thank you. And you know, the acknowledgement that I get because I'm kind of the face. It's because I have all these beautiful faces behind me that do an extraordinary job. You know, I have Peg, I have Tanya, I have Pam, I have Rose. But, you know, when it comes to the budget stuff and the finance stuff, you know, I give a lot of credit to Peg. And I know that the audits are very stressful and they've been very time consuming and they've been a little bit late for all the reasons that Karen said. But I think you're definitely at least in your third year of college now, you're a junior, and you know, it's only going to go up from here. And the fact that our fund balance is where it is from where it started is incredible. And that's a testament to Peg, the department heads, and our select board and our budget committee.
and I think the
Thank you.
select boards in the now and past have put a lot of pressure on Peg to keep an eye on things. And she's done a very good job of it
Thanks.
and told us what we need to do. So,
Thank you.
And the work products for the budget exercise are
I like
spotless.
changing it a little bit. Like, I think we try to improve every year.
beautiful. They're.
I gotta say, the biggest compliment tonight was when Bill went like this. This man does not give compliments easily.
wow.
When he gives one, you know you've earned it.
All right, we'll move along. You all set? Everybody all set?
Thanks.
Good. Go home, Peg. Get a good night's sleep. Yeah. Citizens' comments. Anybody? Any other citizens got comments? Everyone left us.
Nobody loves this
All
week.
right, select board comments, Bob.
Yes, There was a suggestion on the part of one resident of the town. Who was wondering whether or not we could go back to the practice of listening to committee chairs at least once a year. To stay current with what the committees are doing. And I know we've talked about that. Or maybe even ask committee chairs to post a report on the website under each committee category. So when you go to a link on the website, you pull up a committee, there's a report there that tells you what they've been doing. That was just a suggestion.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
The EDC is starting to do that. They have a goal now of having a almost like an annual report.
I don't know how we formalize that. We don't need to form a committee, but.
Or an ordinance.
But there ought to be some way.
We can send that out as a charge to each
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah, that's what we need to do, is we need to write a letter.
Do we just need to give them
Signed off by
guidance
the select board. That
that, hey, this is what we would like to see from you?
Yep.
And we have been a little busy with our meetings to have committees
They've got a
in.
lot on their plates.
Well, we were alternating a committee and a department head, if you'll recall.
And the second thing, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier today. This affordable housing question. It's come up at planning board meetings, people really, and Julie's made the point time and time again. What's the extent of the problem in Waldeboro? What do we need in town to address housing issues? And it was your suggestion, I think it's a good one, to get a study completed on this. Maybe involve a university or consulting firm, like something you don't have to pay a lot of money for. But to investigate what we have and what we need, what we don't have in terms of affordable housing. And see where that takes us.
So just because I just want to say what I mean, I mean what I say. It is a common theme and we hear it a lot. And my question has been, what is our issue? How many apartments do we have? What is the price range? You know, if we're talking about affordable housing, do we mean apartments or do we mean homes? And I also just, because I hear a lot, we also, you know, we're worried about people coming and affording here. We can't forget about the people who are struggling to stay here.
Right.
And so everybody has to have a voice in that. And I just don't know what our problem is and how big of our problem is. It's easy to say we have an affordable housing issue. It's the numbers to back that up. And it's not just about creating new affordable housing. It's about keeping people in their affordable housing. And I think sometimes that last piece, keeping people in their affordable housing, is where that stops, because everybody's focused on this. I don't want to lose sight of the other end. That's all.
I think your point about maybe getting somebody.
And actually, I will give credit where credit's due. It was
That's-
Max who said we
that's
could
the
do
piece.
one of those studies. Yes.
I mean, you said Lincoln County came up with 130.
I believe that's what Max said.
Where did that number come?
Well,
That-
and that's
that's part-
not that I'm poo-pooing anybody, but
No.
what's the number and what does it look like?
Yeah.
I just don't want to lose the faces of the people who are here, who are struggling to stay here.
What's that, Bob?
Yes.
John?
Just to dovetail on that, I would say Lincoln County did that study, but again, where'd those numbers come from? And Julie's correct. I never even thought about that way. We always talk about there's not enough affordable housing. What about the people already living here? Gotta keep it affordable for them to live here,
Absolutely.
i.e. the budget season's coming up. Anyway,
Exactly.
just want to let everyone know, last Thursday evening, afternoon, I was at the RSU 40 facilities meeting. Mike was there as well. I'll go on the record saying right now that they are certainly aware that people have spoke last vote, and they are working very hard at prioritizing and cutting that number down. Right now, they're right around down to about 12 million for priorities. And next meeting in February, they're gonna have a presentation by an outside source. I think someone from the state's gonna come in and talk about the funding options that they have. There are some funds available that they're working on getting to help reduce that even down further. And they're in the process now of figuring out, okay, how are we gonna pay for the remaining of the items? So
Yeah,
they
I
are,
saw the email that was sent out from the chair of that committee, that they've really listened to what the
Yeah.
townspeople had to say from all 5 towns.
they
Which is,
have,
which is awesome. I mean, that's a doable number.
and they
that's
very,
How to do it.
And that would probably fly with the voters 100% versus what we was presented with in November.
and they certainly appreciated us being there, because obviously, we all know in the past, there hasn't been a lot of attendance at these meetings, and myself, Mike, and one of the select board members for Union was there. Not that's only select board, we like the residents to go to these meetings. They have their YouTube video, it's online now, you can actually watch it online. I watched the facilities meeting in person, and that evening I sat in my living room and watched the actual board meeting. So I encourage people, and hopefully maybe we can get a link
Okay.
to the RSU 40's YouTube page, put on our website to keep our voters informed of what's happening with the school districts. We all know, we support the schools.
Mhm.
We all have to support the schools, but we also have to be aware what's happening in our schools.
Absolutely.
Next Monday, the 29th, there is a meeting here at 6 o'clock. A committee, it's actually a meeting. Last week I talked about the Waldeboro Day coming up in another 5 months. I've volunteered to start the meeting and talk to volunteers, and with the hopes we have enough volunteers, so someone can become the chair of the Waldeboro Day Committee to have some type of event in June. Had several messages on my Facebook page of people wanting to be part of this, and I'm more than happy to sit down and tell them my thoughts on Waldeboro Day. But
I get a lot of insight into it,
But I'm not-
especially from last year.
I'll offer my suggestions, my recommendations, and let them run with it. They're gonna need at least 5 or 6 committed volunteers to do just a small little something in June. So anyone who wants to come on the 29th, be there, and
What time on the 29th?
6 o'clock. I want to thank the auditors for being here, and I think that's all I've got.
Mike,
I've said enough.
Will?
Oh, all set.
Yep, I'm good. Town managers report?
I think I said basically my report before. I won't keep us any longer.
Okay. All right, consent calendar. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make the motion to improve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Right, new business. 10.1 interstate septic renewal.
We do this every year so that people can dispose of their solid waste. It's our septic waste facility agreement. It has not gone up in price in over 5 years.
Awesome.
So I recommend that we do this with, we accept this agreement with Interstate Septic Systems, in the amount of $2,300 for our 1-year contract.
I'll make that motion and authorize our town manager to sign it.
Is there a second?
2,300?
Yes, for the entire year.
Any more discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Article number 2, it says municipality is required by state law for the disposal of all refuse, effluent sludge, blah, 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 from all septic tanks and cesspools located within the municipality.
So for
I mean,
2,300,
I've been paying my own septic and I can have the town do it?
what this means is that we're covering when the dump is done, there's a fee that we have to pay them a fee for accepting everybody's waste in Waldeboro.
Okay, so they're not gonna come and pump my septic tank for free.
No,
Well, that's the
No.
way they read the
No.
ordinance.
no, they're
Well, the
accepting,
contract.
but when somebody does come and pumps your
Yes.
waste, they can then use that facility to dump it.
Okay.
You can ask them to come and do.
They're just not gonna show up.
Okay.
But the 20, but it's one of those
On
things
board.
that has not gone up and it's just one of the few items, so that makes it memorable. And we do this every year, but they have been excellent.
That smells pretty good to me.
All those in favor? Okay,
Seconded that.
Will. All right, 10.2. Is it ES and S?
ESS,
Oh.
ES and S voting machine rental
Yes.
discussion. And this, believe it or not, pertains to you guys. I don't know how many of you, I know a lot of you vote by absentee, but anybody who was here during the presidential
Last June.
or last June or the June before, our town ballot is really big. And I don't think you guys or the town necessarily, although people gripe about how long the ballot is, the town warrant is, I don't think any of you are inclined to shorten it down to 2 pages. Hence, we need another town machine, because when people are putting one piece of paper in one machine and we can't mix the machines, we really need a third machine so that we can be running 2 town ballots. People aren't going to have to wait in line to run their ballot. And the rental for that for a year would be $3,000. So we'd like to acquire one so that in June, we don't have the same issue with people waiting in line to cast their town ballots.
There were 2 proposals in the package that we got, one for $2,044 for, looked like a smaller machine. Was that the one for local, or that was the
It's the
one for
same
state
machine.
elections?
It's the same machine, but
Okay.
it's for one single election. The $3,000 would be for a full year of election.
Correct.
And they program that machine. They put the information and we don't.
I send them all the information and it comes to me on a stick and I plug it in and yeah, it's all programmed. So there's one program specifically for the state and then one program specifically for the town.
Correct.
And can I add that last June, I crawled into bed at 2:30 AM because there were so many ballots. We were here processing that late. It was a lot.
I don't dispute the need at all. I just wanted to understand a little bit better. And they're charging $760 to transport these things from Omaha.
Yeah.
Do we have to send it back or do we just keep?
We
it here?
keep it.
We keep it that and until we send it back. And then that covers both ways.
We have 2 machines. One is owned by the state and one is owned by us. And that one was rented to own. The problem is we don't know in the future when the state is going to change the voting machine. So we want to get the same machine that we currently have and utilize that one. And then if the state changes, we're going to have to redo it all over again anyway. So we don't want to invest in purchasing it just yet.
Thank you.
But we also don't want the public, because they were unhappy with having to stand there and wait.
Somebody like to make a motion to do the machine, the voting machine rental?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Just to clarify, Mike, this is for the $3,033 machine.
Yes, which,
It's the rental.
yeah,
The rental.
for a
Yes,
year.
the rental.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any other discussion?
Ballot's gonna be longer this year.
Yeah, they are.
Anything to get voters in the booth.
But I just want to also clarify that Pam spent a lot of time trying to find, could we borrow one from another town that's perhaps a calendar year that we could use? But the problem is everybody has the primary on the same day, so they're all using theirs. So, and we contacted the state about renting one from them or potentially getting another one, and she exhausted all avenues. I even looked on eBay.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Good enough. All right, items for the next agenda. I think we got one already.
Yes.
Potentially setting up a committee, an archaeological committee.
Yes. We should perhaps be able to give you an update from the Sylvania committee at the next meeting,
Okay. Is
or
it,
at least the second meeting in February.
anybody get anything else they would like to add, added? Any other business? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second.